Death and Dementia. We're lucky enough to have Don Bradley that's willing to join me on a Zoom video. Don is a licensed family counselor. Is that the right way to say it, Don?
The licensed marriage and family therapist, Jess.
Okay. And Don is the one that I call when the demons enter my dreams at night. And so I mentioned before in one of the videos, have a healthy outlet if, like if it's working out, talking to friends or talking to a counselor and all those things can help you. The stress is going to build up on you. So have a healthy way to get rid of it. And Don, we talked before that one of the things I mentioned in the video is I didn't go see my grandmother very much when she was in a home. Mom and dad, I do go see them. I don't want to. And it's horrible to watch this happen. And so I do feel a lot of guilt for not going in or not wanting to go see them. I do it, but is that one of the normal things that people dealing with loved ones with dementia or even, other things that when people lose loved ones, is that something normal to kind of deal with?
Of course it is. Of course, if you think about having to deal with the emotionality of knowing a parent, either parent or both parent, at one point they'd reach the status in your eyes, good, bad, or indifferent, they reach like a status. And when they get dementia, it starts to take away from who that person was, the status that they reach, the power or the stature or whatever that thing is, and or the role that they played in your life. They reach this sort of apex, and whenever as you start to get dementia, it starts to take some of that away, and it actually, there's the physical death, but the mental death starts way before then, and it chips away at you, and it makes it, really, really mentally and emotionally hard to sort of deal with. Because if you think about it, like going into a gym and working out, it's an emotional version of that. It's but being with a less capable body to lift it, right? The reason people don't want to do it is because they're like, I knew this person, but every time I go in there and I see the way they've sort of diminished through their condition, I don't want to go and see that anymore because I want to see this person. I don't want to go and have to be presented with a version of the person that I don't know anymore, or the person that doesn't remember me. And so when that happens, it's heartbreaking because you remember this and you're only seeing, a shadow of that situation. So yeah, of course it's going to be hard because you're being asked to lift something with a muscle that's not very strong against your will, no less.
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought up too that when somebody doesn't recognize you or remember you, and it wasn't but a few months ago when the first time dad didn't recognize me, and that was like a kick in the gut.
Sure it is.
Now, and I kind of want people to know too that there's a lot of different choices that I've made, and I'm not saying that I'm right in making them all, but I'm kind of the point where now it's the first time I'm lying to my parents about things since I was a teenager. And where when I can tell dad doesn't recognize me, he thinks I'm one of his childhood friends. I just go along with it instead of trying to correct him over and over. And when he'll ask about his parents, I'm not going to tell him every time that his parents are dead. I mean, is there one side or the other that's better to choose or?
Sure. Well, so think about it. Think about it like this. Are you doing you say you're lying to them, right? But you're not it's you can look at it like that if you wanted to, right? If you wanted to ultimately sort of, punish yourself or something, but in the grand scheme of things, we do that to try to take responsibility for something that we don't have any control over. And ultimately, what it comes down to is, are you doing it specifically to make their life more difficult? Or are you doing it for them? Are you doing it to them or are you doing it for them? And the fact is, your intent coming from your heart, believe that that's where it's coming from. Believe that whatever that good intention is what that good intention is, that you're doing it actually for them, right? To make their life easier, to make their transition into this thing while still impossibly difficult for you, much easier for them, right? Because they're struggling. And the hardest part is seeing this person as they start to fade away along this timeline, right? You remember the height of the person that they used to be. As they start to go, you're starting to lose the person that you knew from this level, right? And when you do, you're confronting it against this idea that you either had good memories of them, or you have all this list of good memories, but also you have this list of things they're going to miss, the way you're going to miss them moving forward, and all this kind of stuff. And it's good memory with combined with the loss, and it's hard. The hardest part is being able to separate the good memory from the loss, because the loss applies to the whole thing. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is get down to a spot where you sit down in the empty chair with the person that was the apex of the person you know, and ask them, when I think about you, how do you want me to think? Well, do you want me to cry every time I think about the loss everything that I've lost with you? Or do you want me to remember the good times, the really cool stuff, the stuff that makes me smile and laugh or do whatever? And I guarantee you, every loved one you have is going to be like, even if you have like maybe a little animosity towards them or whatever, they're probably going to be getting to the end and going, as somebody who's seen a lot of people at the end of their life, including my mother, I'm here to tell you, you're gonna get to that spot where they're gonna be like, yeah, I don't want you to carry any pain on my behalf. I want you to think about the times we had together and laugh or smile or whatever, because I don't want every Christmas or New Year's or every Thanksgiving and every birthday and all this kind of stuff to be just this, oh, I'm smiling, and then bam, all of a sudden this guilt. And because the thing is, we feel this intense feeling, and it feels completely out of control, and we're like, well, I can't bring them back. I can't bring them back. So what can I do to take control? Well, let me take responsibility for something I can't jump into my time machine and change. Does it make sense?
Yeah, and you brought a point too. There's a lot of times where, and I talked to my wife about it too, where I feel like I should be doing something, and I can't figure out what the thing is, and then we'll talk, and I mean, there's nothing you can do about the condition. There's no way to solve it. There's no way to cure it, and but it does feel like I need to do something. And you also mentioned too, where because mom and dad were great parents, outstanding parents, love them to death, and but they're also very strong people. And when I go there, I guess in a way I'm expecting to see that strong person that I saw,
Sure.
grew up with for most of my life, and I don't.
It's
And
not you're expecting it, you want it. It's not that you're necessarily you're basically saying, I miss that version of them. And so I'm going to keep a little part back in my heart on the off chance that they might come back. Right. And then when you see it and you're disappointed. Of course you're disappointed. Right. And then you have to deal with the sadness of that, and that feeling of being completely helpless to the process is the reason that this thing jumps in there and says, you should be doing this. Well, all I would ask you is, what is it you think you should be doing? And when you do that thing, how do you know that that's the thing that's going to make you feel better about it? Right? Because in the grand scheme of things, you're going to get to that spot, you're going to figure it out, and you're going to go, oh, that wasn't it. And what you're going to ultimately realize is that you're sad.
yeah,
You're sad about what is happening. You're sad about what's going to happen, and you're grieving that. And then when we go, I should do this or I could do this, we're grasping at these things to try to say, this sadness that's over here, I don't want to deal with it, so I'm going to try to take responsibility for something. Because at least then mentally, right, there's an intellectual process, and then there's the emotional process. We know how to do the intellectual stuff better. The emotional stuff we're sort of only do begrudgingly, right? And when we finally are faced with it, we're like, oh, let me go do something intellectual. I should be doing this, right? And all it is just guilt to try to grab a hold of something when you're just trying to grieve.
yeah. What would you recommend? Because there are, and we've talked about this, multiple times. There's some people that are absolutely against therapy, whether they had a negative,
Sure.
something negative happened during a counseling session, or they just don't want to admit they need to talk to someone. For people like that who are going to hopefully watch this, what would you suggest they do on their own to, I mentioned working out and things like that. What would you recommend they do on their own to kind of help themselves through this whole process?
Well, I mean, you and I have spoken before, and I've come from the most anti-therapy stock you could possibly imagine, raised in the Midwest and the buckle of the Bible Belt, and men don't cry, emotions are weakness type of stuff, right? So the idea of therapy goes right into that stuff and absolutely just bucks against it. So to come out west, become a police officer, basically learn how to stuff that thing down farther and farther, all the time realizing that we're just stacking this stuff up because we're ignoring it, and then finally having to confront it. I would tell those folks that container that you got from the very beginning of your time on the planet is shaped by that message that you're told early in life. And, you're going to start filling this thing up. And if you don't start pouring this stuff out on occasion, here's the way I look at it, right? You could be the strongest person in the world physically, right? And when it comes down to, think about the world's strongest man competition, right? Biggest dudes in the world lifting these massive weights for world records amounts of time. When they finally put that weight down, does that mean that they're weak, or does it mean it was just time to put it down? Right? You pick this weight up emotionally, you pick it up and you hold it for your whole entire life, and you're not allowed to put it down. Yeah, then I think that the reason that people are so anti-therapy is because they had this big weight. They looked around, they tried to find somebody that understood what they were going through, and they went, here, let me give you some of this vulnerability. And when it got mistreated or whatever, they just went, I don't like therapy because that thing I tried to do didn't turn out the way that I wanted it to, right? And what I would tell those folks is, okay, I get it, I understand, right? You've got to get to a spot where you feel where you can find the person that somebody needs to hear it. You need to find that outlet for it. And there's 4 things that basically are responsible for kind of taking care of your life: physical stuff, the intellectual stuff, the social stuff, and the emotional stuff. And if we basically just say, you know what, I'm not going to deal with this, I want to handle it physically, intellectually, or socially, then what happens is, yeah, we're going to work out. Yes, we're going to go and hang out with our friends and talk about it in whatever way we can, right? The side therapy. Or intellectually, we're going to basically try to use our brains to say, if I can figure it out, or if I could do this, I'll feel better, or I'll process this. No, you gotta deal with the emotional stuff, right? Because you're piling this stuff up in there. The first and biggest part of getting past that anti-therapy hump is giving this one permission to come out, deal with it, feel unprepared for it, be under, feel like you just are not going to be able to do it, feel like it's totally out of control. You're not going to immediately be good at it, right? Intellectually, you can kind of understand it, but emotionally, you're coming out there, you're kind of putting yourself out there and saying, hey, this thing that's coming down the road, I'm really afraid of it. I'm really afraid of how the future is going to turn out, but I'm afraid to tell somebody I'm afraid.
And I think you mentioned a while back too, aren't there the 3 things you need for therapy? Wasn't it you have to admit there's a problem?
Sure.
Be
Yeah, there's three things that have to happen in order for the change to occur, for you to basically kind of step up to the thing that needs to happen. Acknowledge it's going on, right? If you've been depressed for 20 years, it's not who you are. You've been depressed for 20 years. Right? You got to acknowledge that. You got to accept the level to which that thing is negatively affecting your life, right? Truly. I only drink a little bit. Everybody else thinks you're an alcoholic, right? Until you change it, it ain't going to change. And then you got to give this one. Third is you got to give yourself permission to act on your own behalf. That part of you that basically says, I don't want to deal with this. Told myself my whole life, I don't want to deal with this. I don't like it. I don't like picking this weight up. It's too much for me. And you're too afraid to say that it's too much for me, or that I don't have the strength to be able to do it. And it's like, okay, do it anyway, right? Because ultimately what you're trying to do is, have you ever seen anybody jump to the top of Mount Everest?
No.
No, of course not. Small steps and a guide, right? You're trying to take small steps, and you're just trying to find the guide. Whether that's a therapist or not, it's neither here nor there. You just got to be able to find that person with whom you can sort of exercise that emotional muscle so you can start lifting that weight.
So I appreciate it. Is there anything else that you want to add that you would and if you're okay with it, I'll put your website, attach it to this video.
Sure.
But is there anything else that you'd want to tell people who are dealing with loved ones who have dementia, Alzheimer's, or things like that that we didn't cover?
You got to realize that there's two parts of your brain: the part of your brain that's just the thinker, and the part of your brain that's the survivor. This basically makes the part of your survival brain turns it on longer than it wants to be on. And so what you're trying to do is make sure that you're not making decisions or, like declarations about your life or about your future in the survival part of your brain, because all you're just trying to go, how am I going to move on from this thing? And the thing is, nobody's going to have a crystal ball to tell you that stuff. You just need to know that you're allowed to move on, that you're allowed to be sad, that you're allowed to kind of process this stuff. It's allowed to be overwhelming, right? But you don't see anybody go into a gym and try to lift all the weight in the first exercise, do you? Right? You just go, all right, well, lift what I need to lift right now, right? Acknowledge that sometimes it's hard, but if you think about, picking this stuff up and just holding on to it like this, in addition to the whole world's strongest man thing where you're allowed to put that weight down, you got to think about it like going into the gym, right? When you go into the gym, do you have a weight hanging around do you have a weight currently right now that's hanging around your waist that you just basically went, when I'm done with this, I'm just going to hold on to this? Of course not, right? Because you allow yourself to put it down, leave, rest, come back and try again tomorrow. Same thing applies here. You don't have to lift it all at once. You just go, I'm going to allow myself to put it down, take a moment to turn my thinking brain back on and my survival brain off, and then try again tomorrow, right? Because will you be able to lift it all at once? Nope.
I appreciate it. I think what helps too is, and I've talked to, other friends who are going through the same thing, is that a lot of when you feel exhausted after seeing the folks, or even feel nauseous and things like that. And
Sure.
it's normal. So I think
Completely normal.
that's helpful. So you don't
Well,
think
it's also normal to dread knowing that you're going to have to lift this weight in a subject that you don't want to have anything to do with, right? Because that's completely normal. People make themselves feel so guilty for having this dread, but it's not. But if you really think about it, you really put it down there, and the apex of the person that you're grieving is sitting right beside you, and they're looking at this on paper, they're going to be like, well, yeah, of course you're going to be upset about this. Of course you're going to be sort of grieving this at the same time you're having to take care of stuff. That's completely normal. You're just not trying to lift it all at once.
So really appreciate it, Donn. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. Like I said,
Glad I could help.
I'll put your website up on this, and hopefully somebody gets some help out of it. I appreciate it, brother.